Hi, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, The Last Kilometre, Ensuring No Teachers is Left Behind. I would like to welcome you all, and I would like to welcome our speakers, and just to draw your attention that this webinar is being recorded, and by joining, you are giving us the consent to record your questions and everything in this webinar. Welcome again, and good afternoon. We're very happy today to be able to host this webinar to share our experience in ISTEP project, which is part of the education quality improvement program, reaching now its last kilometers also. And today we have 4 speakers who will share with us their input in this webinar. First, we're going to have Mrs. Afaf Ahmed Ali, representing the Ministry of Education in Sudan, and Fabian Shofar, the EU delegation to Sudan, Frederick Vincent from Expert Français, who are also running the in-service, the pre-service component of the EQUIP project. Also, we're going to have a presentation by Dr. Anne Wiseman. She's a team leader from the British Council from the ISTEP project, and Rimaz Hashim, also the project manager, and we'll have some input from Adawiya Al-Mardi, who is a teacher trainer and one of the master trainers in the ISTEP project. We would like to welcome you all again. We're very happy to have you today. Maybe we'll be able to share with you some of the things that the ISTEP team has learned during this project. The ISTEP team have gone through many things during this project. They have witnessed the Sudanese revolution, and they have been very resilient in overcoming all the challenges faced by all the closures we had in the British Council around the country during the one-year demonstrations that were all over the country. And they also have been here working through COVID-19 and epidemics that have spread through the country. And despite all of these things, and despite all of these challenges, they were able to continue to be resilient and to continue to deliver to the last kilometer. Now, the main objectives of this webinar is to showcase Sudan as an example, best practice in delivering education projects in very difficult context. And this is what we're going to learn today from our speakers. We're going to see the experiences. We're going to learn what they're going to share with us what they have learned in that experience and how they were able to overcome and reach the last teachers in the last kilometers in the very remote and difficult areas in Sudan. Also, how flexible and how agile the project was when COVID-19 hit, and they were able just in a very quick way to change the way they were delivering the teacher training and to use innovative ways to reach all teachers despite the fact of the closures, difficult situation and the lockdown in most cities of Sudan. And this is what we're going to be learning today from them and sharing with them. I would like also to thank everyone who took the time to attend with us. And today, hopefully, we will be able to share a lot of content, from our colleagues here in ISTEP project. As you know, the ISTEP project is part of the EQUIP project, which is the Education Quality Improvement Program, which is funded by the European Union. And there are around 5 implementing partners in this project. British Council, Expert Français, and France Education are some of these partners. And this project is being delivered, this program is being delivered in close collaboration with the Ministry of General Education, the Federal Ministry of Education, and the different state ministries in which the project is working. The British Council is responsible on one component, which is in-service teacher training in math, science, and English. And Expert de Français are also responsible for pre-service teacher training in several subjects. And this webinar is going to talk about all of these experiences of both Expert de Français and the British Council in reaching the last teachers and the last kilometers, and the impact they were able to make despite the difficult situations of COVID-19 and the lockdown of the country and all the challenges facing the project in Sudan. As you know, and this is a fact that statistics tells us that in some regions in Sudan and some states of Sudan, we have more than 60% of teachers not being trained. Even the quality of training that has been going on is not of that high standards. That is why the EQUIP Education Quality Improvement Program was started. It has a huge, umbrella under which it's working. It has a huge aim that it will be able to reach teachers, improve teacher training practices, and improve the quality of teaching, and hopefully finally to impact the teaching inside the classroom. I would like now to welcome our first speaker from the ministry, representing the Ministry of Federal Education, Mrs. Afaf Ali. Ahmed Ali, yes. Also, I want to draw your attention that we'll be taking questions anytime you want to ask questions. Please type on the chat box. We'll be recording and following the questions, and we'll be between the sessions, we'll be answering these questions. And also just for our latecomers, also to draw your attention that this webinar is being recorded, and by joining the webinar, you are giving us a consent to record. Now I would like to welcome Mrs. Afaf Ahmed Ali, Minister of Education in Sudan, to give us her opening talk. Mrs. Afaf.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Afaf from Federal Minister of Education. I'm happy here to represent the Under Secretary, Madam Tamadur Tarefi Abdul Karim, and Acting Minister of Education. Okay, hi everybody. Good morning. I'm happy to here to talk to you and to represent Her Excellency Tamadur Tarefi, Minister of Education, and I am so happy to attend with you this important meeting. And we highly, in the Ministry of Education, we highly appreciate this work in the project of EQUIP program, which gather all partners who work in Sudan to support education, and especially in this part of teaching, training teachers. As you know, training is most important and in most factor which represent challenges for education in Sudan, because first is the most important factor, and it costs very high. So we have many levels of teachers, and we really in need to enhance their capacity in how to deliver the education to our kids for more enhancing education in Sudan. So EQUIP program work for in this part with expertise France for pre-service teacher training, and with British Council for in-service teacher training, and we highly appreciate the work which has done here in Sudan, and the coordination between the two organizations which work to deliver training for all remote area in Sudan. So we, as the Ministry of Education, we follow up closely what have been done here with these both organization to work with teacher in all parts of Sudan and in the 7 states. On behalf of the Undersecretary and the Minister of Education, I express our appreciation and our happiness of what you made in the field of training, and thank you for this moment and for this meeting, and I wish for you all success and all the best. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Afaf. And as you said, that teacher education is something very important and it's very crucial. It's one of the main pillars of having a quality education in Sudan. And we really believe that the teachers are the spearheads of education in Sudan. And despite all the challenges facing teacher training, we hopefully that that the EQUIP project has done some impact on improving the teacher training history in Sudan. Now I would like to welcome Mr. Fabian Schoffer, the EU delegation to Sudan, to present us with his feedback on the EQUIP project. As you know, that the EQUIP project is funded by the EU delegation in Sudan. Mr. Fabian, the floor is yours. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I hope that you're listening me well. Thank you for these introductions, and thank you for the invitations in this webinar that will pave the road for the last months of these important projects. As you know, these important projects will continue also in another forms, but we will have an inclusions of pre-trainings and in-training together with our different partner. But I would like to underline first the great work that has been done by our implementing partner, British Council, on this work. And as it was already mentioned and underlined by some colleagues, the period of this project, as for all the different projects implemented under EQUIP 1, the period was a difficult and challenging period, coming with so revolutions, the COVID-19s, and still continuing. So everybody had make a lot of efforts and have learned also to work differently and to find some innovative solutions for trying to continue the activity, so important activity on teacher training. Two elements that are very important for us and for all of us It was what was mentioned as figures. In some areas, 60% of teachers have no training. You have a lot of training, a lot of teachers that's volunteering. So the questions is really for us to ensure that we can support the Ministry of Education in improving the quality of education through teacher trainings, first in the two part of it, so primary trainings and continuous training. So I will be pleased to see and to hear all the debates today, and I will give back the floor to our colleagues. Thank you, Dr. Hala.
Thank you, Fabian. Thank you very much. And as you said, a great work has been done. All the implementer partners have been working very hard through very challenging years and situation in Sudan, and they have really been resilient, and were able to, all the time come up with very innovative ways to overcome all the challenges facing the projects. One of the great aspects of the EQUIP project is that it did not only work with one part of teacher training, it worked with pre-service for the first time in Sudan. And this is something very important, because for the first time in Sudan, we were able to see a link between what is happening in educational faculties of education in different universities, and the link between that and what is going to happen in service. And this is something very important and very crucial. And this is I think one of the key elements that EQUIP was able to bring in teacher education in Sudan, is to build that link between pre-service and in-service teacher training. And also one of the key things that the British Council were working in very close collaboration with the expert Français who were responsible for the pre-service education component. And I think this project is just a very good, hopefully, start for better future for education in Sudan. And it's very nice to hear that the project will continue, and we're going to have phase 2 of the EQUIP project. And this can really make an impact in the life of children and in the life of young people who have stood up during the revolution to look for a new Sudan. And this is, I think, is something very heart-warming. I would like here to welcome our next speaker, Mr. Frederick Vincent from Expertes Français, to share with us some of the highlights of the pre-service teacher training program run by Expertes Français and Français Education. Welcome, Mr. Fabian. Frederick.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Hala. Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for the British Council to inviting me to this webinar. So the pre-service teacher training component of EQUIP project is implemented by Expertise France in partnership with France Éducation Internationale. And it's very complementary to the in-service component implemented by the British Council, because of course the pre-service relates to the students who would become teachers, whilst the in-service relates to the teachers that are already on board. So the pre-service teacher training component was implemented in 9 states, 2 more than the rest of EQUIP. And if we can have maybe the map on the screen. Can we? Yes. Okay. So you can see that the EQUIP project on this map covers mainly a diagonal from the northeast to, I would say, like the south of Sudan. So the EQUIP project itself is implemented in 7 states. But for the pre-service teacher training component, we are working in 2 more steps across 9, and our direct partners are the 14 universities. So the screen is you could see, and we could share actually the the mapping, because I think the map now is a bit too small, but this will be available, I guess, after the webinar. So the structural objective of this pre-service teacher training is actually to reinforce the cohesion between the Ministry of Higher Education and the Federal Ministry of Education. So Dr. Ada said at the beginning that the main partner, the main institutional partner, and Ms. Afaf was also here to represent the Federal Ministry of Education. But for the pre-service teacher training component, our, I would say, like, main beneficiary was the Ministry of Higher Education and the universities and the faculty, and more specifically the Faculty of Education within these universities. So what I mean by reinforcing the cohesion is that what is taught at the university level to the student teachers must be aligned with the ground reality of the needs of the basic school teacher. So if I can have the next slide, please. So that will show you exactly how these partners and these relationships are intertwined for our project. Can I have the chart representing the beneficiaries? Yeah, thank you. So you see that we have the Ministry of Higher Education and the Ministry of Education that are based in Khartoum. And in the states, so Khartoum is one state, so in the 8 other states that we are working in, we have the Faculty of Education deans and professors, which represent the university and linked to the Ministry of Higher Education. And we have the State Ministry of Education supervisors, which are linked to the Ministry of Education. So that's for how this is interlinked with our partners, and that's a very specific activity and area of Expertise France and France Education International within this project. So I will go very quickly through the achievements of the pre-service teacher training components, because this is not the main topic of this webinar, but just to give you an idea. So a teacher qualification framework focusing on the pre-service teacher training has been developed. So everything has been done in consultation with all the partners that I mentioned before and that are still on your screen now. On top of that, 169 Faculty of Education teachers and State Ministry of Education supervisors have been trained in the development of and have developed 6 training modules reflecting the results of the new teacher qualification framework. So more specifically in English, Arabic, math, mathematics, science, history, and in geography disciplines. For these newly developed training modules, we facilitated the training of 370 Faculty of Education teachers to be able to apply these modules within their university and their faculty to their students. So the next component of, I hear an echo, I'm sorry. Okay, so I think now it's better. So the next part was to develop also the evaluation tools, and 32 Faculty of Education teachers and State Ministry supervisors have been trained in the methodology of developing evaluation tools. And 160 Faculty of Education teachers and State Ministry of Education supervisors have been trained in the application of this newly developed assessment tool, both at the university level, but also at the school. So that was just to give you an overview of the achievements within this project for France Education International and Expertise France. So now, if I come to the main topic of this webinar, which is reaching the most remote or the last kilometer, and reaching the no teacher left behind. So for Expertise France and France Education International, we are not directly involved with actually the teacher, the pupils and the school, because we are working at the faculty level, and usually the university are in the state capitals. Also, the faculty teachers are living in the state capitals, and usually they have achieved, maybe perhaps in most of the case, not always of course, but in most of the case, they have achieved a higher degree of education. And also the students, as opposed to the pupils in the schools, the students have managed to enter the higher education system, which I would say is not like the case maybe for all of the children of Sudan who are at the secondary education level. So pre-service teacher training component is therefore not directly involved in this no teacher is left behind, but I would say actually no future teachers is left behind. And despite the limited coverage of 9 states, I show you in the map the diagonal, and thanks to the establishment of various supports, such as, for example, the National Students Welfare Fund, the pre-service teacher training component manages to reach students that are coming from all over Sudan, and even students that are coming from states that are not covered by the EQUIP project. So if I could have, please, I want to show a very short movie, like a few minutes movie, to give you an idea of how we managed to reach and to work actually with students from all over Sudan. Can I have the movie, please? There is no sound. So there is, I think there is a problem with the sound. So I will elaborate, and maybe we can have the movie a bit later. Okay, so you will see the movie maybe at the end of this presentation. So what I wanted to see, and you will see that in the movie, was the global outreach of the students. But besides the outreach of the students across Sudan, we also have two ways. We also have two ways of working and reaching the most remote, which is through the contents developed by the project, by our main stakeholders and the team of expertise.
Frederick, you're on mute.
Okay, so are we going to see the video now, or? Hello? Okay, so in the meantime, whilst the video is going on, I will move forward, and I will focus on different areas of how Expertise France and France Education International, in partnership with our stakeholders from the ministries, have developed content, but also enhanced the institutional relationships to actually reach the most remote. So the first thing is, I would say, through the content of the training models. So again, our target are the students, right? So it's not the children, or it's not the teacher who are teaching directly to the student. So it's an overview. It's not really in depth, but basically during the training, within the content of the training, so we are working with the students on how to use available local resources, what is available in the classroom, if in implementing the lesson, for example, the equipment is not available, which is the case. So we the students learn how to be autonomous and how to be proactive, even if something is missing. Not like me, for example, right now when the actually video doesn't work, and I'm thinking on how to make up of my time. So the students will be actually much better, and I should have benefited from our own training, to be honest. Within the training plan, we also have an exposure to gender sensitivity, because you know that in some areas where, for example, there is a lack of female teachers, it happens that male teachers will actually teach in girls' school. So because of the sensitivity in some area of student, we actually need to the male teachers need to have this. The future male teachers need to have like some ideas, some concepts about how to behave differently with girls and boys, for example. The content of our training also have an exposure to diversity of ethnicity, language, background, etc., etc. So this, as I said, only remains an exposure and an overview, because at the PSTT level, we don't include specific packages for this population. And this is done more likely through the education, with the organization working and specifically working for education in emergency. My colleague from the British Council also have this package for the ISTEP program, within the ISTEP program, etc. So from the institutional perspective, the project supports the faculty and the schools, even the most remote, to work together through the support of the State Ministry of Education. So we are linking, actually, we help link this faculty that are the state, at the capital of the state, with the school that are even the most remote and the less accessible in the state. There is also the facilitation of the students to undertake their internship in these very remote schools, where they actually might be hired as a teachers, as it comes even sometimes from as a request from the school themselves. So the students, when they become a fully fledged teacher, already know their environment and their public. During the follow-up missions, also from example, from the technical experts of our team, or during the cascade training from the meta trainer that with whom we are working, the actual teachers, which are also covered by the ISTEP project, are encouraged to participate into the students' internship. So first, to create a platform to share best practices between the experienced teachers and the newly trained student teachers, which will become the teachers the year before, but also to benefit from the exposure of new practices in states that are not necessarily covered by EQIP, or that won't be covered in EQIP 2. We also have this part of the content is also how to manage big groups, right? So great numbers of pupils in the same class, or how to work, how to manage like different groups, like smaller group in the same classroom. And if I can have the next picture, please. So you can see in some, the next slide, you can see some, yeah, you can see that in some classes, the first picture on the top left, in some classes you have like the pupils working together at a different table. So we enhance this. We work at enhancing and teaching the students on how to manage these different groups. And actually, the student teachers or the trainers that you see on the other pictures are doing the same when they are in the big training of 100 or 160 people. So I think because I want to leave some time, if it's possible now, to watch the movie, I will stop here, but we have numerous of examples that I would be happy to further develop and elaborate during the panel discussion. But I want to stop here now and to leave like a couple of minutes for the movie, if you don't mind. So thank you very much, everybody.
الاسم زينب محمد صالح محمد، من جنوب دارفور نيالا. بدرس في جامعة الزعيم الأزهري كلية التربية. محنة التدريس ذاتها يعني فيها مهنة إنسانية، بتخليك تكتسب يعني مهارات كثيرة ومعارف كثيرة. والله السكن في الداخلية اخترته لأنه يعني ما عندي حل كده يعني قريب عشان إنه من أقعد معهم وأسكن معهم من البيت عشان أجي الداخلية. وأنا تلقائيا برضو المعيشة في الداخلية أفضل من إنه تكون في البيت. يعني فيه مثلا يعني لما أرجع من أي جامعة وثاني بعدين بصعوبة المواصلات، وهنا أرجع البيت وثاني بكرة أرجع بكون تعبانة.
دكتور حامد موسى حامد، مدير مجمع محمد عبد الله خلف الله أم درمان. طبيعتنا نحن هنا يعني صندوق القومي لرعاية الطلاب طبيعته خدمية في كل المجالات، من ناحية الصحة، من ناحية الخدمات في الداخليات، كهرباء، مياه، من ناحية الإسكان بتاع الطالب. مما يجي من الجامعة بيجينا نحن هنا في صندوق القومي لرعاية الطلاب في الداخلية. يعني كل اليوم بتاعه بيكون شنو؟ قاعد عندنا في الداخلية. عشان كده بنجتهد اجتهاد كبير نوفر له شنو؟ البيئة المناسبة للعمل للتحصيل الدراسي.
الحياة في الداخلية بتعلم الزول كيف يعيش مع مع الأوضاع. مثلا في ظروف كثيرة، في أوضاع يعني بتخليك إنك تحس بالمسؤولية.
هرجع البلد وأقدم وأشتغل في في نفس المهنة، مهنة التدريس، يعني أدرس في البتاع وأساعد المجتمع هنا في بلدي. المدارس الحكومية فيش من المعلمين، لأن المدارس الخاصة بيكون فيها يعني مراتب بتاع المرتبات كتير، عشان كده المعلمين كلهم بيقوموا بيمشوا المدارس الخاصة بسبب المشاكل دي. لكن بسيطة جزء منها يعني إنه أنا أساعد بها وأوعي بها الناس، يعني عشان هم يقدروا يحلوا المشاكل دي الناس عندهم.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Frederick Vincent from Expert of Francais and from Education France. As you have highlighted and the uniqueness of this component of the EQUIP project, which is to work with pre-service teachers. And as you said, no future teacher is left behind. The uniqueness of for the first time that this project is the first project that will work really actually with higher education and with pre-service teacher training, and even have reached the level of reaching these teachers who are future teachers, and to work with them and to link them with the ministry. Also, I think one of the unique things that the pre-service component was able to do is to introduce new ways of teaching through your need analysis that was carried by Expert of Francais in the beginning in the 14 state universities. That rote learning was one of the common things happening in schools, and that one of the key things of the framework introduced by Expert of Francais is to change the methodology of training new teachers from teacher-centered approach to student-centered approach based on activities, changing learning from rote learning to hands-on learning, and training teachers, and at the same time making the link between the state ministries and the universities by also including supervisors from the state ministries in the follow-up of students. One of the key highlights of the pre-service component was also the work of the students, teachers, when they do the practical component of their courses in the university, which when they go to schools and actually practice what they have learned in universities. And this is also one of the very important components where the new teachers or the student teachers really for the first time experience the life of working as teachers in schools and equip part the pre-service conducted by Expert Français introduce this framework for pre-service teacher training and also focused on the practical component of that when students go to practice what they have learned in the schools and how they are evaluated and how they are followed. And even the supervisors who go and supervise them from the ministry are aligned with the new methodologies being introduced in the project so that they don't judge the students on the old methodologies, when the students start to teach hands-on activities, task-based activities, centered approach, usually they're faced with a challenge that the supervisor doesn't approve what they have been doing. So having the supervisors from the state ministries on board really was one of the key things to success of the pre-service component of the EQUIP project. Mr. Frederick Vincent, thank you very much for sharing with us. And now I would like to introduce our second presentation by Anne Wiseman, who is and Rimaz Hashim, who are both leading the in-service components of the project. Thank you. Anne and Rimaz, yes.
Thank you, Dr. Hala. The slides will be uploaded in a few seconds. Those who see sometimes there isn't a slide on the screen, there's a little bit of a pause. So I'm going to start off talking about the project, and Rimaz will join me halfway through. Just start with this slide to show an example of some of the locations where teachers are teaching. Next slide, Katie, please. What I'll do first of all is outline a little bit about the ISTEP project, and then I'll show some of the components of what we're including. Could we have the next slide, Katie, if possible? The in-service ISTEP Teach Training project is in service, as you've already gathered. We link in very closely with pre-service, working with Expertise France. Three key points here. We are still working on a national training framework for teacher training, based quite loosely on the British Council Teaching for Success CPD, Continuous Professional Development Programme. We worked very closely with the state ministries here, as well as the National Centre for Teacher Training and other key institutions to develop a framework which didn't exist before. The second bullet point looks at the numbers we're training. So it says here 185 trainers. What I mean by that is 185 teachers who have trained up to become teacher trainers over the 3 years of the project. We're in the final year now. So these are teachers who've gone on TOT, Training of Trainers courses, over the last 3 years. Well, we're in our final year now. And additionally with that, we're working with 185 supervisors across the 7 states where we work to develop supervisory skills, areas such as mentoring and teacher development, and re-looking at the role of the supervisor, which Frederick mentioned briefly as well, I think. And again, very similar, we work in tandem with the pre-service, looking at the methodological approaches we don't work only in English, we're working maths and science as well as English in the basic primary schools. And a key component of the training at TOT, which then cascades down to teacher training, is equality, EDI, equality, diversity and inclusion. Making sure that's quite a very strong component in our TOT courses and therefore our teacher training courses. And I can talk about that in a bit more detail later if necessary. So the training reaches 6,500 teachers. Katie, can we have the next slide? Because it's in the 7 states, which you now see here. It's the dark blue states. You'll notice they, this is it says ISTEP targeted states. Of course, obviously it's the ISTEP targeted states, but as Frederick mentioned, the Preservice covers a few more areas. You'll notice they're on borders because the key, one of the key objectives of ISTEP is to focus on IDPs and refugees and the children who are coming, those IDP and refugee children who are coming into the classrooms. So you'll see most of those states are on those border areas where there's a trail through to go up actually further into North Africa. Next slide, please, Katie. So as with any project in any country, there are a lot of issues and barriers. Katie might just keep going through with all the pictures that'll come up. So the first one you've seen is pedagogic levels of training and equality and diversity issues. So those are components which we aim to address in the teacher training. When I talk about equality and diversity, we're looking at girls' education, disability in the classroom, how do teachers deal with that? And also language. Not everybody's first language is Arabic. There are, I think, 400 local languages in Sudan. Somebody may correct me on that later. Let's say a large number. So first languages are not Arabic. At the top, you see one of the locations. I think this is South Kordofan. So you can see fairly limited resources, I mean, the classrooms are going to be have a limited infrastructure, or no infrastructure at all. Beneath that, you see logistics. There's a picture of the floods. We have a lot of flooding in Sudan in August, September, October. Makes it very difficult to get to places, and therefore, of course, difficult for schools to open if the teachers and the students can't make it to schools because of flooding. That also, of course, inhibits teacher training. If there's training in another locality or another state or even in Khartoum, people just can't get there with the flooding at some times of the year. And there's limited transport, and currently in many states very limited or no petrol for transport. So a lot of logistics there. And then the final picture on the right-hand side, resources. Many classrooms do have blackboards, but without electricity, obviously there's very limited connectivity in some areas. So it's chalk and talk to a large extent. And I think Frederick and Dr. Haller have mentioned this briefly about the recitation, rote learning, which that accompanies. So next slide, Katie, please. You'll see on some of these locations that they're also very large classes. So the ISTEP component of ISTEP initially, and still does, takes face-to-face training, because as you will have seen from the context, it's very difficult to do much online. So we started off in the first 2 years with face-to-face training. Some of the components looking at obviously the reality, managing large classes, using local resources. You'll see in the picture in this slide, if you won't see it very clearly, but among the counting resources you've got there, you've got stones and shells. And what the teacher is doing there is demonstrating what we call the movable blackboard, which some of you will be familiar with. When there is no blackboard, you can develop something like this. Again, I won't go into detail now, but basically looking at what you've got and what you can work with. I mentioned EDI, equality, diversity, inclusion, very much a strong component in our TOT, but not only in theory. How do you do it in the classroom? How do you deal with students who perhaps do not? You're teaching maths. Maths is taught in Arabic. they speak very limited Arabic. So what do you actually do? And then really another component is building on what students and teachers already do well. I think Dr. Hallard mentioned rote learning, recitation, adapting that so it's actually useful and helpful into a more learner-centered methodology. And also what is possible. We can all talk about very nice community classrooms, but we have to see also what's possible within the context, which I've already shown. Next slide, please. And so I'm going to pass over to my colleague Reemaz here, because I mentioned face-to-face teaching, but of course with the COVID-19 pandemic, that was no longer possible. So what did we do to try and reach our teachers in the remote locations where we couldn't deliver face-to-face training? Over to you, Reemaz.
Thank you, Anne. Thanks, everyone. And thank you for joining us. Thanks, Anne, for the presentation. And as what Anne was saying, Anne was showing how we were able to reach teachers through face-to-face training, but also in very remote locations. But since COVID-19 and the restrictions around everything, basically, and with not being able to continue conducting face-to-face trainings and the whole country lockdown, we had to have a proper COVID-19 plan and our COVID-19 response plan, and also ensuring that actually no teacher is left behind. So, which was obviously very difficult in a country like Sudan due to that digital divide. So the question here is, what is digital divide? So digital divide has been broadly defined as the gap between demographics and regions that have access to modern information communications technologies and those who don't basically have it or have very restricted access. These technologies can include telephones, televisions, computers, internets, and so on. These teachers are usually in very remote locations. So what do we mean by remote locations? Remote locations are places in Sudan, obviously on every other countries, which have limited or no electricity. So in Sudan, for example, we have regions which have 2 hours to less than 2 hours electricity, access to electricity, which is very common in Sudan, and where internet accessibility is no more than 2G, and where radio coverage is low or very much limited. So how did we reach teachers in these remote locations, and how did we make sure that they do have access to quality education development programs like ISTEP and as ISTEP actually, and how did we ensure that no teacher is left behind? We chose 3 approaches. WhatsApp, which is our first idea, and that so our WhatsApp groups had master trainers and all our participants, people, obviously, those are teachers who had access to internet, but was very limited. So maybe they didn't have laptops or they didn't have computers, but only had access to their mobile phone, their smart mobile phones, and a limited internet now and then. So these WhatsApp groups were subject oriented. So we had different WhatsApp groups for different subjects, math, English, and science. And they were headed by our master trainers, where teachers discussed self-access materials and had wide discussions around and answers around their worksheets, and they shared their experience with the self-access materials. Our second approach was the hard copies. So what are the hard copies? So we've tailored our face-to-face training materials to hard copy self-access materials, and we've sent them to the States through ministries and international humanitarian aid providers, everyone who was able to access the field. Because of the lockdown between states and the whole country lockdown, we weren't able to access all the states. So we reached out to other organizations or ministries or food trucks or whoever was able to reach the teachers. And then we distributed these materials to the teachers, to their states, to be used by them. And then after that, we've noticed that some of these teachers even started meeting socially to discuss these hard copies and materials. Our third approach was the radio. So we've tailored our face-to-face radio program, face-to-face material training material, and then we broadcasted this through radio stations, through national radio stations. And we even had call-in shows to answer these questions and by trainers and consultants and questions that came from the teachers themselves. But the reason why we chose 3 different approaches is that because there wasn't a unified approach to this. Some teachers had mobile phones or smart mobile phones. Some teachers didn't. Some had internet access. Some didn't at all. Some states had access to radio stations. Some didn't, or even the national radio stations. And so as you can see, we had to tailor our response based on the state itself and based on the teachers themselves. Katie, can I have the next slide? So the next slide, I'll show just the extract of the radio programs, just for English, math, and science.
Teaching English Radio, brought to you by the British Council.
A radio series for teachers of English. Welcome to our first programme. I'm Sarah Bradshaw, and I've worked as a teacher and trainer in the classroom and on the radio. If you're a teacher of English, and particularly if you're working with large classes in difficult conditions, then this is definitely the series for you.
أذكركم إخوة المعلمين بمهارات القرن الحادي والعشرين الثمانية المحددة وفقا للأدبيات التربوية الدولية، وهي مهارة المواطنة المحلية والعالمية.
الخطوة الرابعة بيقدم المعلم تدريب للتلاميذ يتضمن عرض مجموعة أخرى من الأمثلة واللا أمثلة، مثلا بطريقة عشوائية. بعد ذلك يطلب من التلاميذ إنهم يصنفوا ما قدموا لهم من أمثلة لأمثلة مشابهة وأمثلة غير مشابهة.
So as you can see, we had 3 radio programs that were broadcasted through the national radio station, the English one, and a tailored one for math and science using our own face-to-face teacher training material and the Sudanese curriculum. There were about 12 episodes and were broadcasted, I think, in 2 months and a half. And we're actually now, because of the popularity and the people liked it very much and the teachers were very happy with it, we're now actually considering broadcasting them again to cover more states, maybe even more states than the states that are targeted by ISTEP or ISTEP. Katie, can I have the next slide, please? So feedback around our COVID-19 response plan. We collected a lot of data from the field. Unfortunately, we weren't able to analyze all the data for the webinar, but as you know, it's just a lot of data, so we're now working through it. But we did collect the data and to see how effective this reaches. And there are 2 points that stood out for us, 2 elements after the initial analysis of the gathered data. One, the development of informal community of practice. So these teachers were actually supporting each other in these WhatsApp groups or through their communities, in the WhatsApp groups, and even meeting every now and then to discuss worksheets or the radio program or the self-access material that they had, which is something that happened informally. And we've noticed that within the community or within their village, they were able to do so. We even heard some teachers saying we started meeting under a tree every now and then to have some coffee and then discuss the material. So that was brilliant, obviously. The second one was direct subject knowledge improvement. Some teachers stated that their English has improved, and especially in the writing skills using the WhatsApp. So you can see these are some of the feedback that we gathered from the teachers. Katie? So lesson learned. Okay, in a country like Sudan, of course, there are so many lessons learned, but I think 3 points that stood out for us while we're doing this are the 3 C's: creativity, communication, connection. Creativity is that there wasn't, I would say, something specific or a unified response to this. We had to be very creative in the way that we reach teachers and the way that we are able to provide these development programs and training materials. So we had to be very creative, 1, in the response itself, and 2, in the way that we're going to implement the response. Communication, we had to make sure that everyone is aware of what we're doing, and that not only us at the British Council or as ISTEP, but also as other implementing partners, because we found a lot of help from other implementing partners in Sudan, like Save the Children, helped us with getting materials from here to there, and other implementing partners. So it's very important that the whole education community is aware of initiatives and interventions like this. Connections, in Sudan, I don't know about other countries, but in Sudan, it works pretty well. So we had to have connection with people. We had to know who is traveling where and who's going where, so we can help and so we can get help from other organizations or implementing partners. And then understanding the environment and what is possible. So we discussed a lot of responses at the beginning during design, and there was a lot of ideas about doing an online course or getting teachers to have a Zoom meeting and things like that. They're brilliant, amazing, but they're not very much relevant to Sudan and relevant to the states where we operate. So we had to understand the environment and we had to know what is possible and what is not. And the second part is the silent learners through our WhatsApp groups and radio station groups as well. We've noticed that there's a lot of people who are not participating, but that doesn't mean that they're not learning. They are actually silent learners. And you'll see, I'm going to present a video after this, and you're going to see some of these points very clearly in the video. Follow up on things, making sure that everyone is aware that we push as hard as possible to get things happening. So basically, those are where the lesson learned. There will always be a gap. So we're very realistic when it comes to our planning, as you can see. We made sure that everything is tailored to the environment and possible for the teachers. And I think that's it. Katie, I think after this we can show. So reaching the last kilometer. This is I think a picture can says a lot. This also are teachers trying to reach remote locations, and you can see how creative they are being. I think that's it. Thank you very much. And we'll be showing a video now that will then link everything that Anne and I were saying. Thank you.
So how did the WhatsApp training go?
I personally used to answer the questions and send my responses to her. Whenever I faced a problem, I would ask for clarification and she would get back to us and advise on what to do. Also, whenever there were mistakes, she would let us know and ask for correct answers.
Were the worksheets marked the same way?
It wasn't the same way. I used to write my answers on the worksheet and then send the answers on WhatsApp. Then I would copy the correct answers from WhatsApp too.
Oh, that sounds useful. We did broadcast episodes on Omdurman radio station. Were you able to listen to them?
No, I wasn't. There's no radio reception in Suakin.
Oh, even the national radio station?
No, nothing.
Is there anything that you found to be beneficial and that you would like to tell us about it? If yes, will you use that in the classroom?
There were a lot of things that I was familiar with, but they weren't introduced to me in the way that they were here in the program. For example, the first lesson discussed adjectives and adverbs, and we used to just present them as they are to the students. However, the course provided details on how to teach these concepts. First, we were asked to what those concepts refer to, so I researched the answers. Then I sent my answers and they turned out to be correct. After that, I applied what I learned in my classroom, including the examples we learned. The training was great. I attended all sessions and I learned a lot from other participating teachers, especially that some of them had good answers on WhatsApp. Sometimes I would copy their answers and correct mine.
Tell me how or if the teachers interacted with each other on the WhatsApp.
Yeah, we find many silent listener. That means they read what the other teachers wrote. So I think they benefit more by reading, even they didn't write. But I think they, when I asked them, they said WhatsApp was very, very useful way of training for the teacher.
Good. And did you get any other feedback from the people in the WhatsApp group?
Yeah, communication between them. They knew each other. And some people knew what is your name, and they call to each other. So I think it was very, even we have many problems with WhatsApp, they try to change the way of training by using the hard copy. I think it is easier than WhatsApp for some people who haven't phone or problems with phones.
How did that work? So you got the hard copies?
Yeah. I think they are 10 papers of training. So the teacher took a paper and tried to do it at home, and then they went to Ustaz Abbas at Ministry of Education to get the answers and try to compare their answer with the model answers. Yeah.
And did Ustaz Abbas deliver the papers to the teachers?
Yeah.
He took them to the teachers in the remote areas?
Yeah.
Hi. Thank you, Anne, for this interesting journey we have gone through. Thank you, Rimaz, for walking us through your COVID-19, ISTEP COVID-19 plan to overcome the lockdown in the country and the challenges of reaching the last teachers and the last kilometer of Sudan in the far remote areas. Now, actually, we have come to the panel discussion part of our sessions. Please, if you have any questions, just type them on the chat. We will give them to our panel of speakers. And really, one of the key questions I have seen here is that talks about what was the reaction, and this question is directed to Anne and Rimaz, the ISTEP team. What was the reaction of the teachers in the remote areas, beside the face-to-face, having these three kinds of flexible teacher training methodologies, the radio and the hard copies and the WhatsApp. So what was their input and their feeling about that? Anne?
Pretty positive. I think, as with anybody who lives in a fairly remote area, you can feel left out. You saw the journey we went on to in the Red Sea state, and I spoke to the teachers there, and they they actually live in, for people outside Sudan, they live in the main city in Port Sudan, and but they're posted to these quite remote areas. So they were very, very positive that to put it one way, the training had reached them. They didn't have to go for teacher training. It was the first time there'd been any teacher training delivered in that locality, because it's just so difficult to get to. So on the whole, pretty positive. But I don't know, Adawiya is also on the panel. I don't know if you would have a comment on that as a Sudanese trainer yourself.
Yes, hello everyone. This is really a nice journey that ISTEP ISTEP have gone through. And regarding the training and the remote areas. So Dr. Hala, if you could please repeat this question for me. Sorry, you are on the mute, Dr. Hala. You are muted.
As a trainer, and you have been through this journey from the start. Now, what response did you get from the teachers about the delivery of the WhatsApp, using the WhatsApp, the other COVID-19 plan, you know? What were the response?
So teachers were very thankful to this program, ISTEP ISTEP. And their feedback was always positive, because we have been through the WhatsApp groups with the trainers. And the most important thing, as Ramaz has just mentioned, was the collaboration and the discussion and the improvement of their language. So I think it was a very relaxing atmosphere, where teachers were able to negotiate, to discuss, and to raise other questions related to the training materials. I think most of them were having a very positive idea about the WhatsApp groups.
Please, if you have any questions, just text them in the chat box, you know, and you can ask specifically for our panel speakers, any of our panel, who are Mrs. Afaf, representing the Ministry of General Ministry of Education, Federal State. Also, we have Fabian Chauffeur from the EU. And we have Frederick Vincent from France, Expert of Francais. And we have also Anne Arimaz representing the British Council, and also Mrs. Adawiya, who is one of the master trainers in the ISTEP ISTEP project. Now, there is one question I think is directed to Mr. Fabian, EU representative. Do you think how is the EU vision of the ISTEP, and do you see that it could be applied in other EIE context, emergency in education context? Is it applicable, the same kind of project? Mr. Fabian?
Yeah, thanks for the question. But basically, what we would like to see in the years is an extension of such an experience, because as you can see, for any of our projects, maybe except the coordinations at the national level, it was just focused on very specific areas. So that would be very important for us to try to cover more the country, because basically trainings or pre-trainings are as important as for anyone everywhere in the country. So that's I hope it's answered your questions. Generally, with which support from the EU on that is that we are starting with ISTEP 2 for the next 3 years, extending the experience, and we will continue to invest in education sector for the next 5-6 years in the same with the same, I would say, directions, quality educations, and ensuring that's also larger than what we were doing previously, generally focusing on refugees, internal, so displaced people, and trying to reach the more vulnerable populations in the country.
Okay, thank you. Now, one question is directed to Mr. Frederick from Expert to France. How do you ensure the link between pre-service training and in-service training in the current context? How do you see that? As we have learned here that EQUIP has a second phase, and how do you, how Expert to France, ensure that the link between the pre-service and the in-service continues? Mr. Frederick?
Yeah. So thank you very much. So the fact that I'm here, being invited by the British Council, I think is already the answer of one question. So the pre-service, as I said during the presentation, so the pre-service is complementing the in-service and vice versa, of course. So one way is, so there are two ways to see that. The first one being, of course, through the institutional collaboration between the Ministry of Higher Education, and when I'm saying Ministry of Education, it of course includes like the universities, the Faculty of Education, and the Ministry of Education, both in Khartoum and at the federal level. So by having these two institutional bodies working together, and we know that it's not like obvious that these two ministries will work together, not only in Sudan, but like, for example, in my country, it's not like, it's not necessarily obvious that two ministries, although they have like such a strong connection with necessary work together. So having these people sitting in, having like supervisor in the States and Faculty of Education teachers sitting in the same room, working together, having a very open discussion, reaching to agreements is, I think, a very good step towards the transition between pre-service and in-service. I would say from the project perspective, the fact that I'm here again shows that we have like this, I would say like strong cooperation, or at least like communication with our colleagues from the British Council. And I'm not only saying that because because Mr. Fabien Schäfer from the EU is here, but because this is true, and this is something that will be even more enhanced during the transition between the project EQUIP 1 and the second phase EQUIP 2. So I hope I'm not going into the technical details because I think that first I don't have the capacity and that will take too much time, but that's basically the two approaches we have to ensure that this ISTT and PSTT are very comprehensive and complementary.
Thank you, Mr. Frederick. Thank you. Now, my next question is to Mrs. Rimaz. The question is that what will be the teachers' need in Sudan after having this training? What the teachers will need after having this training? Ms. Rimaz?
Thanks a lot, Dr. Hala. I think honestly there's a lot of key areas that needs to be tackled. I'm not sure if it's by one entity, but obviously by the ministry and other implementing partners. But a lot of issues that, well, I think one of the key points that stood out for us when we were in the field is that teachers deployment. So there is a lot of regions where teachers are from, let's say, the same state, but they are all in the capital of the state. And because of all the issues that has been happening in Sudan and the situation in these states, they're not able to actually stay in their locations or stay in their localities and teach there. So we're left with a lot of schools that are, I would say, deserted. This then contributes to a lot of other issues. So I would say teachers deployment, which is Ministry of Education role basically. But I would say that's number one, to have, so the teachers do need obviously the training, but we think that there's a lot of other factors that contribute to them being effective teachers. They're there on the field teaching. So it's not just teacher training, it's material, it's curriculums, it's, I think, can you all go on mute, please?
Rimaz, you're on mute now. Please unmute yourself.
Sorry. So it's not just teacher training, it's access to materials, it's access to classrooms, as you saw from our from our presentation, there's a lot of teachers who are working with very, very low resources, which is fine as long as they have at least the books and the textbooks for the students. So I would say there's a lot that the teachers need. It's not one thing or two, there's so many. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Rimaz. Thank you, Rimaz. Now, the other question I see on the question board is for Adawiya, Miss Adawiya. Now, the fourth component of the fourth trees is the collaboration. Now, as one of the trainers in the WhatsApp group, what kind of collaboration, what activities, what examples of collaboration can you show us that happened as a result of putting these teachers together in WhatsApp groups?
Okay. Master trainers have been distributed over the states that were meant with the WhatsApp training. Each master trainer, we share the same material, of course, and we have the same timing depending on the level of the teachers. That is, I mean, what day we are distributing the units and what day we are giving answers. So we are always in contact with each other, the three master trainers, the national master trainers, about the materials, about sending them to the groups, about doing any other remedial work or having any additional work. This is always being done with master trainers all together. Another thing about the collaboration is by some time when we were delivering the WhatsApp groups, we have an idea of having one master trainer and the other two, you can call them silent master trainers. They are going to follow up what's going on in that group, headed by one of the master trainers. So actually, the master trainers, you see one master trainer having a group that is to be supervised. But actually, the three of them are working together because they are giving their comments and they are meeting sometimes with Dr. Anne. And here I would like to thank all of the technical team with the British Council who were very helpful with the material, sending the audios on time and all these things. So we are always in contact with each other, either for WhatsApp meetings or delivering material. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Adawiya. I think we're coming to the end of our session, but we have one last question for Anne. Anne, there is a question here that says, what was the structure of training and the duration and the coaching process? How did it go? Can you give and elaborate about that?
Well, I haven't got much time, as you say.
Yes.
So what was it? The structure of the training and the...
Yeah, and the duration and coaching processes. How did it go?
Structured training in a nutshell was cascade. Lots of discussion about that, I know, advantages and disadvantages, but it worked for us in Sudan to a greater or lesser degree. So we had, as Adawiya has mentioned, and she's our colleague here, we had what we call master trainers who are Sudanese and have already delivered training for quite a long time, I think, Adawiya possibly, in Sudan. And they trained up teachers who then became teacher trainers. That's the basic structure, and I've mentioned some of the components already, so I won't go into that. Coaching, not quite sure. I mean, yes, the approach is very much a coaching, a development approach. We had a whole session, quite a few sessions on mentoring and development, and ensuring that there's, I mean, you've seen the locations, it's not as easy as it would be in a city with lots of communications. So coaching, developmental, continuous coaching is quite difficult. But as you've seen, we've tried to do that through WhatsApp when we can't reach people and use other means to do that. There's a lot more to say, but I'm aware time is short. I think there might be a question for Afaf from the ministry there as well, Dr. Hala.
Yeah.
About trainer, yeah.
Yeah. The last question is for Ms. Afaf now. What is the future policy of the Ministry of Education for organizing supervisors and inspectors to go to remote areas and supervise teachers. Ms. Afaf from the ministry.
Okay, thank you. And I think now at the Ministry of Education, it's there is a big work which is going on to redistribute the teachers. You know, we have maybe enough number of teachers, but they gather in the cities and in the capitals. So this and this is appear clearly with the study which has been done in the field of education to build the strategy of the education that mentioned that the teacher was not well distributed in the all areas of Sudan. And we know the teachers needs a lot in the field of training, so to deliver a good knowledge and good teaching to our children. So we have I think we have a great plan for training in the future, and this plan will be done with teachers and supervisors in all areas of Sudan. And I wish I have a response to the questions, and thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Afaf. Now, one last question is directed to Anne. Is there any did the project come up with a national training framework, and is the national training framework, is it finalized? And Dima Gerard is asking if they could have a copy of it. Anne?
Yes, I am with you. I'm just plugging in a right. Yes, a quick answer to that, Dima, is yes, but it needs redefining now and developing further, because this was in the very first. This is the very first stage of the project, which is now about 3 years ago. So as with anything, it's a working document, and definitely, Dima, we will meet up and discuss and go through that. That's a quick answer for you. We will carry on that conversation though.
Thank you, Anne. We have come to the end of our webinar, and I would like very much to thank Mr. Fabien from the EU, Mr. Frederic from Expertise Français, our team from the British Council, and Mrs. Afaf representing the Undersecretary Tomato Trefi from the Federal Ministry of Education. And I would like to thank all our guests and everyone who joined us. And the last kilometer was actually not only a last kilometer, it was a revolution, a one-year revolution, an epidemic, and everything. And due to the resilience of the both teams in all organizations working and all participants in this project, the resilience and the will and the dedication to make a success and to work towards improving education of children in Sudan, this project have been able to go through all of these difficult times. Thank you all very well. Thank you all for coming, for attending, and hopefully we will make the recording of this webinar available very soon, and we can also share with you the different PowerPoints used presented during this webinar. Thank you all for coming, presenting. Thank you all for attending, and hopefully we can meet again. Thank you.
Thank you for organizing.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for attending.
Thanks a lot.
And
Thank you.